You're listening to School Counseling Simplified, a podcast with easy-to-implement strategies for busy school counselors. Here's your host, Rachel Davis from Bright Futures Counseling.
Do you ever have a kiddo pop into your office last minute and you need an activity to do quickly? Or do you ever wish you had access to hundreds of school counseling resources at your fingertips? Well, my Impact School Counselor membership is for you. Inside Impact, you get access to hundreds of resources sorted by topic, tier, season, or monthly lesson plans. Simply log on, find what you need, download it, and use it with your students right away. You also get access to our community where you can meet like-minded school counselors to troubleshoot tough cases, get inspired, and collaborate with your colleagues. Not only that, we also know how important it is to stay on top of your professional development. That's why we offer live quarterly trainings on hot topics that you need most. Impact is designed to make your counseling life easier. I know you're super busy. That's why I've made it super simple to access everything you need in one place. This way you can spend your time and energy doing what you love the most, helping kiddos. If you're looking for a one-stop shop for all of your counseling needs so you don't have to worry about searching on different sites, paying for things here and there, you can find everything you need on demand in one place in Impact. Head over to stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/impact to watch a sneak peek video behind the scenes of what all is included in the membership. Again, that's stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/impact to get started today. I can't wait to help you make an impact. Hey guys, you're listening to School Counseling Simplified. On today's episode, I have a special guest on. I interview Leslie from Informed Decisions, and Leslie shares with us all about how to start an advisory program at your school site. Now, you may not be sure exactly what an advisory program is, but it's similar to implementing like a school-wide SEL program and really getting teachers on board. So I ask a lot of clarifying questions, how we can do this at the big school macro level, and how we can do it super simple and get started today. So Leslie has some great strategies for you guys. She's truly the expert on this topic, and I think you're going to love this episode. Okay, let's go ahead and dive in. Hey, Leslie, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited to chat with you. For the listeners who don't know, Leslie also has a TPT store. She's a school counselor. And we actually met in person at the TPT conference in Austin back in 2019. So we kind of got to know each other then. And I can't believe that's already been like 4 years. So I'm so excited to chat with you again and to have you on the show. So thanks for coming on.
Well, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. So tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So I'm actually a licensed clinical social worker, and I've done every job in the school you can possibly imagine, from social work and, providing programs and advisory and helping develop programs. And I've worked everywhere from, New York City and Boston, and really, with definitely diverse populations, and love working with teens, and those are my babies. And just, it's the fun part of the job, like the best thing, the funniest things that they say,
Yes. No, and I'm so apologize. I was calling you a counselor. I didn't realize you were a social worker. But no, that's funny you say that, because one of my first memories, because Leslie's store is called Informed Decisions, and it's all like high school resources, correct?
Middle school and high school, so 6 through 12.
So secondary, yeah. And most of my stuff's like primary and very like cutesy, kidsy kind of stuff. And I remember I saw one of your resources, and it was like how to put on a male condom or something. And meanwhile, I'm making like butterfly social skills or something. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so different, but so necessary. I mean, obviously, but I just love it. I'm constantly having people ask me for more recommendations when it comes to middle and high school resources. And I send them your way a lot, because I know you cover so much that I don't even tap the surface on. So that's amazing. You're doing amazing work.
Thank you.
Okay. So you're here today to chat with us about advisory programs. Now, this is something I don't know much about, and I know my audience wants to learn more about. So I'm just going to let you roll with it. So tell us, what is an advisory program, and how does this pertain to school counselors?
So it has different names in different parts of the country. I know like the Northeast a lot here calls it advisory, and I know some other places do too, and have different names. So you may be like, oh, we have that program. It's just called something different. Essentially, it's like an SEL program that both teachers and counselors facilitate. So like the whole school gets an advisory class. So, depending on the school, they do it graded or they do it pass fail. So it depends on what it is. And I've worked a lot with both counselors and teachers to kind of implement these programs in the school. And so sometimes, you'll get that math teacher that's like, I don't want to talk about my feelings. And I'm like, you don't have to, that's therapy, like more like supporting students and like learning the topics. But for counselors, like, I think sometimes I've talked to counselors that are like a little nervous about doing it. And I'm like, it's exactly what you're doing in your counseling. If you're doing your one-on-ones or your small groups, or if you're doing like classroom lessons, it's the same thing. It's just in a little bit of a different format. So it's all those lessons that you guys already know, all the skills that, that speech you have on whatever topic that you say over and over again with like the different students that come in with the same thing. It's just like fun, interactive activities to get them to start thinking about it. And the thing that I love about it is feeling like when I was doing groups, I had like when I first started doing rites of passage groups or doing like social, like they weren't called social emotional learning then, but doing groups on like social skills, you could see the difference in your students and you're like, wow, I really wish I could like touch more kids so that it really, like you can see it across the school. And that's what this allows you to do is you can see the difference between the students that have had advisory and the students that haven't, or, I'm sure you see it with your kids, the students that have had like social emotional like skills and learning and what that looks like and the difference in like they feel more connected to the school and the classroom and to the teachers and to their peers. So this kind of allows for that.
I love this. No, I don't want to interrupt you. I just want to ask my questions before I forget them. This is so good. So a few clarifying questions. So like do the teachers are teaching like the SEL lessons a lot and the counselor is as well?
Yes. So, I mean, you can have different roles on whatever the counselors do. So I've done this in so many schools. So I can tell you like advisories that are successful, ones that fail, like.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Can you tell us like tips, like what are 3 things not to do and 3 things to do when it comes to advisory?
Don't make it a homeroom. So don't make it the first 10 minutes of your school day and then think that is going to change your school environment. That's a homeroom where you're taking attendance and there's no time to set up, do an activity, get anything done. Even when we have like, when we're facilitating our group with the kids we're pulling for lunch, we feel like that's not even enough time, so trying to do it in 10 minutes, that's definitely one that is a no-no. Another one is like when you start facilitating the advisories, don't start with goal setting. Goal setting, the kids, like, it's all about team building. Like, we know when we do these groups, like you do team building, you do like team building until they're sick of it. And they're till like, can we do a different topic now? Like team building so they feel like connected to each other. When you start with goal setting, they're like, I feel like it's so fake. They're like writing something down so that they can complete an assignment and that, they're just trying to get something to give you an answer and it doesn't feel authentic because they don't have that connection yet. I actually have a blog post on this that I will link for you guys too. But another one is I had a teacher once that was like, I'm going to do activities on trust. So I'm going to have them read an article and then write a summary about trust. And I'm like, no, no. So, like the million different activities you could do to teach students trust. I'm sure you have super fun ones for, your kiddos, but like doing some kind of activity where they have to share something with each other or, interactive, or the typical one that everybody sees where one has a blindfold and they do an obstacle course. So those type of things. And then you have a discussion like after you do your activity, not like reading an article about what trust means and right. It takes away and makes it that school strict study feeling where you want it to be like engaging and that they get like the main points out of the things that they're saying.
Right. No, I love that you're saying this because I was thinking I'm working on a resource. I don't know if it'll be ready by the time this airs, but like a leadership group for boys. And it's difficult because the goal of the group is for them to become leaders, right? But through doing activities and team building, it's not like, what is leadership? Like objective 1. So it's kind of like building those skills through the process. So I think that's a big difference. And the teachers, I guess, a lot of times are like, teacher focused, like, yeah, let's read it and write about it, but it's a little different than that. So I love this. One question before I want to hear sorry, I'm all over the place. I'm excited about this. You told us our 3 no-nos about, not making it too instructional, not doing it in homeroom. That's a big one. And then what was the other one you said? Not,
well, you don't want to do like the 10-minute homeroom.
right. And then I thought you had a third one. You said 3 things.
The trust, the homeroom, and doing goal setting as your first
goal setting.
activity.
Yeah. Avoid goal setting. Love that. Those are good, really good strategies. Because the 10-minute homeroom, I think that's where everyone's starting. Like, oh yeah, I know where I could do this. Let's plug it in homeroom. So that's a great one. So I want to hear your do's for advisory because we heard your don'ts. But before that, now, is this something where the counselors would train the teachers?
So you can have it multiple ways. So one way is to hire a consultant to come in and put together your program if counselors are like so overwhelmed. Another one is, and that's kind of how I got started in this. They're like, we want an advisory. Can you come in and do this? So, and I luckily, like one of my first jobs had this amazing setup for advisory. They actually did, it was in a middle school, and they did every Wednesday, they had half a day, and the half a day was like full advisory. So they even had like, every teacher taught it. So like the PE teacher could take them and do ropes courses, or like the music teacher would have like a music advisory. So like they played to their strengths, and it was like a half a day of like them doing, the advisory. And then the other half of the day was like PD for teachers, which is also where I learned how to write lesson plans. So
I love that, integrating like the specialists, like the PE teacher and the music teacher. So in this example, would they all have a topic? Like, would the topic be trust or something, or
so I mean, it was different. Like that was one setup that a school's had. Like other ways that it can be done is like there are advisory committees that you set up, and like everybody comes together, which is also again hard because you're going to have those people that all want to do goal setting first.
Mm-hmm.
And you have, or you can have the counselor set it. But this is hoping that like your admin has worked out with you that this is going to be integrated into your day. Because if you're trying to do your individual sessions, your push-ins, your, like your group work, it's just too much to try to develop an entire program for an entire school. And then also teach teachers how to facilitate, these classes.
Right. So in order for this to be successful, did the teachers need a block of time in their daily? This is like a daily SEL practice, essentially.
So it depends on your school, because you can have it set up like the one school had the Wednesdays. Some schools have it every day. Some schools have it a couple days a week. It would be set up like a class, and then they should have prep time. I mean, a great way to do prep time, and that I like it, and I know staff really hates PDs, but if you do a really great PD where you're using the time to demonstrate and model the different activities and literally give them things that they can do in their classrooms, it ends up being like productive time. So all their prep is done during the PD time, as opposed to, having to prep it all themselves.
Right. No, I love that. So that way they're doing it, during contract hours or whatever. That's great. Okay. What are some do's of advisory? What do you recommend?
So things that I do, so I don't know if they're do's for everyone, but I definitely do some kind of activity so this is more like once you have the advisory started. The do's for that would be, having some kind of activity that allows them to help create ground rules and expectations, because then the students really feel like they're part of it. So I do an activity on that. I also do an activity where I take a survey from the students on the topics that they want to discuss. So they also have that, because, you go to math and they're not like, hey, do you want to learn about a rhombus? Like, they don't ask you what you're learning. So it allows you to give that opportunity to like, hey guys, you're inputting into what we're actually doing here. And it gives them the opportunity to, have input into what they're doing. So they're more excited about the topics. Mm-hmm. And then those days that they're like, oh, this topic, and you'll be like, look, on the survey, you guys all voted that you wanted to talk about this topic. Uh-huh. And it really like brings them back. So that's two.
And I'm guessing no students are choosing goal setting.
It was really interesting. One of the groups that I did, they did choose goal setting,
Okay.
and they had like career exploration,
Oh,
and they were really into it. So I think it's all depends on like the students, but the reality is like you can set up your program that you're hitting every topic that you put on that survey anyway. So they're going to hit everything, but it makes them feel like they have a tremendous amount of input into
that's
what they're
great.
doing. And then the other thing I would say, which I said before, is team building. All about like whatever else you do in your first few weeks of advisory, just do team building so they feel connected. And you want to do stuff that's like low risk, where they're not feeling like they're disclosing about their whole lives, that they're just disclosing that information that, starts them to connect to each other.
I
So
love
those
that.
are my 3 tips of
No,
do's.
these are great. This is super great. So would you say that like an SEL program and an advisory program, are these like interchangeable terms, or if not, how are they different?
I mean, they could be. I know that schools have it and they call it an SEL program instead of an advisory program.
Mhm.
So I forget the term. Someone else told me that they're like, oh, we have that. They live, in the Midwest, and they have the same type of program. It just has a different name. So I know like different places use different names for things. I
Right.
mean, I guess the big thing when you hear advisory is taught by both counselors and teachers, where maybe where we hear SEL, we think more counselors are implementing it.
Right. I think that's what I was thinking, where I was going with that. So I love this idea because I'm always telling the counselors, I'm trying to give them more time, right? More time to do direct student services. And counselors get overwhelmed when they're like, I have to teach class lessons to every student, like tier 1 overwhelms counselors. So I always say, like, outsource it, like try to get the teachers to teach for you, try to get the students to teach for you, like through student ambassadors or like, students teaching other classes. I've done that before. But yeah, getting the teachers on board, this is so great because then the teachers can reinforce the counseling concepts. And this is preventative, right? Because if they're able to, do this with their teacher, then you're less likely to receive a referral for something similar down the road.
Yes. And you also hit on something else too, that I set up my advisory classes and the programs and push-ins that I teach, that the students, like once you get to a certain point, the students know if you have like your strategy and everything set up, that I let them start to lead and make it more youth-led and adult guided. So where they're, here's the activity, and they'll like read the directions to the class. And then I even have like a little cheat sheet for them so that they can read like the questions and answers, and they can facilitate the discussions. And we're kind of there to be like, you know what, that's right. Or maybe you want to think about that a different way, when it's
Yeah.
some of the more difficult topics. So I kind of set up, when I'm working with the students that way. So it kind of, they start to become the experts and
Mhm.
really get into it as well.
I love that. Yeah. If anything, at least the ones who are teaching, we know receive the info. If no one else does, we know they did because they had to kind of prepare. So, this is so good. I love it. Now, we're talking about like school wide, program wide. You're talking about consultants coming in. To our listeners, this may seem like a huge task, and they're like, "This sounds good, but little old me at my one site can't pull this off." So, what like practical tips do you have for counselors to kind of get started with this right away?
So, it depends. Like if they want something that is school wide, they can start it off. And it also depends on your administration. If your administration's like always saying yes to things that you do, which those are the best, right? Um, that's something you can say like, hey, can we test this out? I'll show you, with a group or two, if they need proof, because data is always a thing. So anything that data you would use for your SEL programs in general is the same data that you can use to implement and start a program. It's a little different for like for little ones like you for versus high school. They might want, recidivism rates in college, and they may want more like, less school suspensions or expulsions, again, depending on where you go to school.
Mhm.
So, but also something that's really important is if the advisory is not implemented correctly, you're not going to get a change in any of the data that they're looking for. And it does take place like over time.
Right.
And it's so great because if you get it going and everybody's excited about it, then you can have like competitions and do and things for like, it's going to be past that when this airs, but like I was thinking about like, school kindness week, where you do something and you guys can have like your competition on the different types of kindness between the advisories, if it's grade level or if it's, because you could do both grade level, or sometimes people do mixed level advisories. So, there's so many different great things that you can do. So, I mean, a way to start it is, if you want to start small, start with your own one. Start with a program, get 15, no more than 15 kids, put it together and start doing social emotional learning. But also, there is so much data out there too, of programs that have been really successful that have the proven outcomes that exist. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel and prove this to administration if they need to see that it works.
Do you find that the teachers are really on board for teaching these type of lessons?
So you will definitely get your mixed bag. You will get, there's so many teachers that over the years have definitely said to me, I would really love to talk about relationships, and it'll be like that ELA teacher. And then they'll be like, we just don't have time because I see that it's a problem. Or, I've had people that ask me to come do classroom lessons because there was harassment in their class. Those teachers that are open to all that are going to be your easiest market. The ones that are I already have enough on my plate, those are the ones that are going to be a little bit more work. But that's kind of like working with that difficult student, right? It's the same as you just keep building that relationship with them, you keep supporting them, you find out what their needs are, which you can do through a needs assessment for the teachers to see what they're looking for. And the same thing that we're doing with the students, you do with the teachers, to really see what are you looking for? What are the gaps that we're having here in learning? And what is the social emotional stuff? I remember being in schools where, some of the freshmen just had no idea about how to behave in a public setting, where they're unzipping their pants and fixing their shirt in the middle of class, just even basic behavioral skills. So, any of that kind of stuff can be addressed, and just any of the topics that they think that there's a need for.
I like that. That's something I am always talking about. It's doing as needed lessons, even for the counselor, going in, doing the class lessons. I always like to give teachers that space. If you have a custom need, you don't think school-wide needs, but your class is going through something, let me know and I can come in and do a custom lesson just for you guys. I think teachers don't even know that that's a service that counselors can provide. And in this case, you're letting them know the advisory is going to benefit them ultimately, right? So even if they feel stretched too thin, they have too much on their plate and they don't have time to implement this new thing, hopefully by taking the time to implement it, it's going to save them time on the back end because they're going to have less behavior issues to deal with or things like that.
It absolutely helps with classroom management and behavioral issues, without a doubt.
Yeah. So I think that's a good selling point for those teachers where it's hard to get buy-in, classroom management and behavior, they, don't want to deal with those things. So by telling them this is a preventative way to kind of get their time back. And use the data.
I'm thinking, sorry, I know we had 3 don'ts, but don't turn a definite don't, which happens with some of those teachers that are resistant, is they turn it into a study hall.
Okay. It's funny you said that. I was just thinking how you could the inverse, use a study hall time to do this. But you're saying they'll turn this into a study hall. They're oh, I'm good. I'm not going to actually do circles or anything.
Right. They do a study. I've had ones do study hall, and I've had them also do current events. So
Okay.
let's read through an actual newspaper and pick out current events and discuss it.
No. So I'm thinking you were saying the counselor can teach alongside, or I'm thinking a good model could be when the teachers are all doing the implementation and maybe the counselor's walking around to different classes and kind of facilitating or giving some input instead of teaching their own lessons. Have you seen that model?
Yeah, I've done both.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I've probably done just about every kind of model that exists. Maybe there's some new ones, but I definitely, I had one where I went and helped co-facilitated some of the teachers that weren't feeling as confident about doing social emotional learning skills. And, after a couple of times, they felt more confident with how, the thing that to keep in mind, it's a little less intense than we would do as a counseling, a counseling group, because you're not going as in depth with all the students' personal stuff that we would in counseling. And so for teachers, it's going on a little more, and for counselors, it's going in a little bit less,
I like that.
So it gives that thing, and you don't need to be the counselor when you're facilitating either. You can always say, hey, let's talk about that later, or like refer them to someone, like if they have another counselor, or if you're the
Mhm.
counselor or the social worker or whoever, to talk about the topic at a different time if it's like an intense conversation that
Right.
in your head you really want to address because it's part of who you are, but you
Yeah.
still have to take it outside
Right.
of the room.
No, I love that. I love that we're making sure that we're defining what the purpose of the advisory and how it's different from like a counseling session. And that probably makes teachers feel more empowered because they're like, okay, I can do this. Like I don't have a background in counseling, but no stress. It's not like a counseling session, right? It's
Right.
yeah, it's something entirely different. Oh, I love this. Thank you. Do you have any other like last minute little tidbits you want to share with the listeners when it comes to implementing this at your school?
I mean, I feel like like counselors just have confidence in yourself. Like, this stuff. And I
Mhm.
think working with a lot of counselors, like when they were nervous about advisory, I'm like, this, these are your topics. And then sometimes the teachers, the counselors wouldn't even use some of the stuff. They would create stuff on their own because they started to get more confident in, that everything that's going on. And also, that's something else. You don't have to feel like you have to invent like these great new lesson plans every time. There is a lot of free stuff out there. There is a lot of stuff like, we both talked about having teachers pay teacher stores. Like there's a bunch of different stuff like on social emotional learning out there. So you don't have to feel pressured to sit down and write a full year's curriculum.
Mhm. Yeah.
There's stuff that already exists. So it doesn't have to feel so overwhelming. You say, you know what, I want this topic, and then you can kind of find it somewhere.
Right. Yes. So if you have any, we'll obviously link to your store, but if you have any like free resources that you usually recommend, we'd love to link to those as well to
Yeah,
get people started.
absolutely. And I can link a couple of blog posts on the how-tos and how to get started, so it makes it a
Yes.
little easier.
Yes.
I think of what else. I do also have a Facebook group
Okay.
for advisory. So I put in like different tips and tricks, and there are all different advisors in there that are either starting out or have some expertise and like, provide some of their information that they're looking for. So it's a free group if people are interested in doing
Oh
that.
yeah, that would be awesome. We'd love to link to that. And this is something that you can do from elementary all the way to high school. Is that right?
Yes. However, if you need elementary resources, then you have to look at Rachel's store because I don't have anything from K through 5.
Right, right. You're sweet. Thank you. Yes, but in terms of like the program in general, it can be done at any age level.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm sure it'll be a little different. Like if it's younger students, you're gonna talk about stuff that's more age appropriate and more
Right.
relevant for them. And following directions is always a great one across the board.
Oh yeah.
Things like that. So there are definitely different. And I don't know if people are doing social emotional learning in classrooms now more than they were for elementary, because that may be something that is happening.
Right. I'm not really sure. I know my friend Megan was working in Houston and she said there it's like mandated a social SEL hour or some, or maybe it's 30 minutes. I don't know. There's like a block of time that teachers are mandated to do, but then I know other states aren't doing it at all. So I think it really just varies wildly. But it sounds like everyone could benefit from an advisory program like this.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing this with us. It's something I didn't really, when you're like, I want to come on and talk about advisory, I'm like, cool, I want to learn about it because I don't know what you're talking about. But now I do know what you're talking about now. I didn't realize all the overlap with SEL lessons. But yeah, this is amazing. It's really good stuff. And I think our listeners are going to find it super helpful. So thank you for your time today, Leslie.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited that I was here. I'm trying to think of I have thought of one more last minute tip.
Please. Yes. No, please.
So for me, it was carrying around a binder
Mhm.
because depending on when they do advisory, some people do it all at the same time. So, if you're a counselor, you end up getting like the last pick of the space.
Right.
So having that cart and then having the binder with all your stuff organized was something that was so helpful for me that I did for like years, because I could literally flip open and pull out the stuff that they needed and had all the lessons with their class information in there. And that
Okay.
was like a big deal, I know, for me, because I had so many different locations that I had to move to. There was also another place that I was in that I taught. There was another counselor and we split the entire school. So along with our individual counseling, we did advisory for the entire school.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were teaching all the lessons.
Yeah. So she was teaching half the like half the grade, and then I was doing the other half of the grade.
How often?
I don't remember. It was every day. I was doing it
daily.
different.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah. It was most of the day was taken up by doing advisory. I did have a 5th grade then.
Oh, okay.
So we did character building.
Okay, nice. Okay, yeah. So having the cart, having the binder, so I'm sure getting a little organized goes a long way. I love it.
Sorry, I know we were wrapping up, but
No,
it
that's
popped into my
fine.
head last minute.
Yeah, no, we want all the tips. Thank you. Speaking of, if you think of something else later, if people want to follow up or if they have questions for you about getting started with advisory, where can they find you?
So I have the Facebook group. I have Instagram. I will provide all the information that people can link and reach out to me if they have any questions.
Awesome.
I love answering questions because it gets me so excited that people are able to implement this stuff in their schools. And I just feel like, all those things that we want to share and allow to be out there, like that we've been, that we as counselors, we're like, they really need these skills and we want to help put it out there. I feel like the more schools we can do it in, the better.
For sure. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Leslie. This has been great. We'll link to everything in the show notes, and thanks for coming on today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.
Thanks for listening to School Counseling Simplified. You can find the links from today's episode in the show notes. If you'd like to connect with Rachel, she's on Instagram and Teachers Pay Teachers at Bright Futures Counseling. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes of School Counseling Simplified. Talk to you next week.